Okay, so we're going to do Act 2 here. Excuse me, Act 3, but just let me get there real quick. And before we do, I want to revisit one scene in Act 2 that we needed to spend a little bit more time on. And it's right here. I wanted you to pay attention to Aragon. He's the second suitor. And here we are on page 85. Here's the second suitor. And this is him talking about the deal. He says, if I fail of the right casket, never in life to woo a maid in way of marriage. And then if I fail, I need to leave and be gone immediately. So this is where he talks about the risk or the deal in order to have the opportunity to try and marry Portia by picking one of the right caskets. So this is a little bit more specific than even Morocco's statement earlier about the hazard that he's undertaking. So then what I want you to do is I want you to look at Aragon's logic. Just like Morocco, he uses a logic. Logic is kind of like where you're talking to yourself and you're comparing reasons to the other. So one idea leads to another idea, leads to another idea, leads to another idea. That's logic. Logic is the way that ideas follow each other. And so what I want you to be able to do is to tell me what steps of thinking Aragon takes in order to make the choice to choose silver. So I'll give you a little bit of hint. Here is him talking about lead. So this is step number 1. And then here's step number 2 with gold. And here's how he rejects gold. So this is his rejection of gold. And ask yourself, what is the logic, the rationale, the analysis that he is using to reject gold? So I really want you to have annotations here. Big time. I want to see annotations in the margins for this speech. And I want to see that you've really tried to figure out how he decides to choose silver. And of course, this is his rationale for silver. And this is where he says, okay, give me the key for the casket. So I want to see annotations about the logic. What is his logic? So step 1 is lead. Step 2 is gold. And then step 3 is silver. And can you undo all of the different reasons he gives for rejecting lead, for rejecting gold, and for choosing silver? I think you will find it quite interesting. Of course, he opens it up here and finds that he chose the wrong one. So as Homer Simpson would say, this is a dope moment. And then he also reads the list. Instead of Portia's portrait, it's the portrait of a blinking idiot inside. So the portrait of a fool is inside. And then, of course, there's this riddle, similar to the one that Morocco got for gold, of why he chose poorly. So see if you can undo what's wrong, what the riddle says. The riddle from Portia's dad says why silver is not the choice. So Aragon then leaves, and now we have another scene with Salanio and Salarino come in, and they are also talking about more ships that have wrecked, more shipwrecks. And so Antonio's bad news keeps continuing. And they say, boy, we hope it turns out well. Then Shylock appears, and this is pretty important here. And several of you looked at this already, but I want you to pay attention to this he says, Shylock shows up in Act 3, Scene 1, and this is where it really starts to get interesting. So the very first scene is Salanio and Salarino discussing that Antonio has lost all of his ships. And then the very next scene shows Shylock being teased by Salarino and Salanio about Jessica fleeing. And I would really love it if you could dissect Shylock's feelings for Jessica. As with lots of Shylock speeches, you will find that there is one way to see Shylock as being angry at Jessica and dismissing her or damning her to hell. And then in other ways, there is a way to see Shylock as actually being hurt or feeling betrayed as a father. So I want you to analyze Shylock's feeling towards his dad and be able to come to a conclusion for yourself in your interpretation exactly how Shylock feels about his daughter's betrayal. Is he just upset that she took the money? Is he just upset that she fled with a Christian? Or does he genuinely miss his daughter because he loves her? Now, here in this line, he says, I'm not going to worry about my daughter anymore because I've got something to calm me down. And now Shylock is truly crossed over the path towards the villain. There is no more doubt in our minds that he has lost his temper, that he has partially lost his mind, that he is truly only focused on revenge. And he says here, I am looking forward to finding the beggar, Antonio, and I'm saying let him look to his bond, his contract. He used to call me a usurer. Let him look to his bond. Let him look to his bond, meaning, hey, he doesn't have the money. This is where I want my pound of flesh. You guys know that's a pound sign, right? And then Salarino says, why? What's a pound of flesh good for? It's not going to earn you back your money. It's not going to make you any money, this pound of flesh. It's not going to pay you back for all the money that Antonio owes you. And then Shylock has, perhaps, one of the most famous speeches in all of English literature. One of Shakespeare's top 5 famous speeches of all time. This is the most famous speech in this play. This speech has been referenced by politicians throughout history, including Martin Luther King. I believe Abraham Lincoln references this speech. I wouldn't be surprised if you find this referenced in John Fitzgerald Kennedy. This is one of the most famous speeches of all time about prejudice. I want you to understand every single sentence in this speech. Star, 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 star. If you spend an hour on your homework and you don't read anything else in Act 3, spend an hour understanding every single word, all the logic, all of the sentences, all the pronouns, all of the images in this particular speech. It is really, really famous. It is an awesome speech. I'll show you later some famous actors who do this speech. Every actor worth his salt wants to do this speech. Okay. The rest of the play, we have this conversation between Shylock and Tubal in the following scene where Tubal confirms that sure enough, Jessica is gone and he hasn't been able to find her. And once again, you could kind of look at this speech to see if Shylock is just worried about Jessica's money, or this conversation to see if Shylock is just worried about Jessica's money, or whether He actually does miss her. So that might be interesting to look there. And then we get to the next scene, and Portia is finally talking to Bassanio. And so now finally, Bassanio gets to be suitor number 3. And if you notice, Portia really loves Bassanio. She wants him to be her husband. So everybody else has failed. So she's saying, hey, wait a little while and see if you can find her rationale. 1 or 2 lines that really capture why she wants Bassanio to wait, why she is afraid for him to go for the riddle now. Bassanio, of course, being kind of a heroic guy and the good guy in the play says, oh, no, no, I will go ahead and choose. I want to do it now. And they kind of have a moment there where they say, all right, tell me, she says, why? Why are you willing to risk? And he says, let me tell you about my love. And can you look perhaps at the way Bassanio describes love to Portia? You might find something interesting in the language that he uses. And he then goes off. While he is choosing the casket, a song plays. So this is kind of Shakespeare entertaining his audience with a little band. I don't know, maybe like imagine that it's, oh, somebody told me the name of your most favorite band nowadays. Is maybe it's like Imagine Dragons playing in the background while Bassanio reads all of the riddles and starts making his choice. And then here is Bassanio's logic. And of course, we know Bassanio is the good guy, the lover, the hero, and so we all know he's going to pick the right casket, right? And so see if you can figure out why he chooses lead. Of course, it wasn't the gold, it wasn't the silver, it was the lead. And he opens the lead casket here, and he sees Portia's portrait. So that means he won the game. And here is the riddle that says why lead was the best choice. So it's the riddle by Portia's dead father. So make sure you understand a good bit about what those mean. Then they kind of speak, oh, how much they love each other, and she gives him a ring, and oh, I really love you too, baby. And you can look at kind of, again, the language that they use for what kind of love they have for each other. And then Nerissa, the maid, comes in, and she's all happy, and she gives congratulations. And Graciano shows up, and he gives congratulations. And also mentions that Graciano, by the way, has fallen in love with Nerissa. So it's kind of like contagious now all of a sudden. Everybody's falling in love, and Portia says, oh, is that true? And Nerissa says, it is if you give me permission. And so Bassanio says, is it true, Graciano? Yes, my lord. And so now it's going to be Graciano plus Nerissa falling in love. So now we've got all kinds of people falling in love. You've got Jessica and Lorenzo falling in love and getting married. You've got Portia and Bassiano getting married. So this is the classic comedy where everybody is headed towards marriage at the end. It's like a disease. Like everybody falls in love, and everybody who's near them also ends up falling in love. Except that, unfortunately, Salerio shows up and spoils the love fest because he brings a note, and he comes in and he hands Bassiano a letter, and he says it's about Signor Antonio, and Bassiano opens the letter, and as he reads the letter, Portia notices that the color from Bassiano's cheek leaves him, that the letter has some really bad news, and then Bassiano communicates to Portia that, hey, I was bragging about my money, and then here's a letter that says that my friend, and every word in it is a gaping wound issuing lifeblood, that my friend is in danger, the guy that loaned me the money that I used to woo you. Solario confirms what's going on, that Shylock is going before the Duke and all the Magnificos, and he's suing in a court of law, in Venice's court of law, to have his bond. Even though everybody tries to convince him not to, Shylock is determined. Jessica is there, and the daughter, this is Shylock's daughter, says, yes, I heard my dad swear to it, that he's going to do it. So everybody is confirming for Bassiano that this is not a joke, that he needs to act quickly. And of course, here's the letter itself that he reads out loud. And it's a letter from Antonio saying, all of my ships have miscarried, they've all wrecked. But then look at how Antonio finishes his letter. It's very interesting. It is impossible that I should live. So this is a man who's quite depressed. And he says, use your pleasure. If your love do not persuade you to come, let not my letter. All debts are clear between you and I. I would love for you to dissect Antonio's letter to ask, what is Antonio's mood, or what is his request from Bassiano? In scene 3, we see Shylock arrive, and everybody is begging Shylock to let Antonio off the hook because nobody wants to see this good guy, Antonio, killed. And Shylock says immediately here, jailer, tell me not of mercy. Shut your mouth telling me about mercy. And then we've got this wonderful exchange, this very angry, violent argument between Antonio and Shylock. It's one of the best scenes in the whole play. And here you have Antonio saying, good Shylock. Look at how he uses good Shylock. Is he begging? And notice how he's cut off right there at the end. Look at Shylock's words. Look at his language in every single speech. Look at how Antonio, is Antonio giving up? Is he begging? What is Antonio doing? What is his reaction to Shylock's determination? It's a great scene. You can imagine it being in a movie with dramatic music playing in the background. In the meantime, Portia, Nerissa, Lorenzo, and Jessica have all come back to Venice on their own. Bassanio has left Portia, and he's already in Venice. And Portia and Nerissa have decided to come back on their own, along with Jessica and Lorenzo. And they are talking about the problem, and Portia comes up with a really neat plan on 131. Habit means uniform, like a nun's habit. And she comes up with the idea here that that she and Nerissa will disguise themselves in order to go to the court and use a few tricks that Portia has to maybe save Antonio's life. And you're going to see those tricks in Act 4. Then the act finishes with this really interesting scene at Jessica's home. So Jessica's now married. She's married to Lorenzo, or she and Lorenzo are living together at least. And Lancelot is, of course, their slave now. Lancelot is kind of the one who's they've adopted him as their servant. And it's very, very interesting because now we have Lancelot and Jessica, who we know grew up together. You know, they were both living in Shylock's house. And look at how they talk to each other. This is a married woman and a servant. I would love for you to have some annotations that capture what is their relationship. I think you will find this scene quite interesting. Lorenzo, the husband, shows up and he starts having interesting words here and here with Lancelot. So on this page, on 135, I would love to know, this is the husband and the servant. And I would love some annotations that show me what is their relationship. This is an odd way to end the act, because I think you will find that the relationships between these three people, are not what you would expect. And yet these are the people who, Lorenzo and Jessica, who are ahead of all the other couples. They've already been happily married. And I think you will see that their marriage is not exactly, well, it's not predictable. And I would love to hear your analysis of that with some lines. Celerino shows up at the end and says, or excuse me, at the end here, they say, okay, we've got to go. Everybody's got to go to the trial. And then the Duke shows up. He's of course, the ruler of Venice, and he's going to have to preside over this trial. And he and Antonio speak about what's going on. The Duke says, hey, I'm really sorry about this. I'm sorry what's going on. And Antonio has this very interesting attitude that he's had throughout this act. And what I would love to know is whether this attitude is admirable, whether it is heroic, or whether you think it shows any character change since the beginning of the play. Antonio is a puzzling character. What's he feeling? That's the end of Act 3, the beginning of Act 4. That's not too bad. Only a few minutes of homework. A really exciting act to read. I think you will enjoy it a good bit.